Hey everybody, welcome back to Race of History. We are going to get into a couple of different videos today. I'm going to try to get through the Hannibal series from History Marsh, and I'm going to start putting in other videos with the Napoleon series, but we're going to start with the next Napoleon video, a Wellington offensive, and let's get into it.
Spain and Portugal would become a graveyard, not just for young French conscripts, but for the reputation of some of France's most famous generals. General Junot, Marshal Soult, and Marshal Jourdan had all tasted defeat. Marshal Massena had been recalled in disgrace. Marshal Louis-Gabriel Suchet was the exception. French generals in Spain were notorious for their looting. Soult, based in Andalusia, was probably the worst, reckoned to have stolen 1.5 million francs worth of art from Spanish monasteries and churches. As governor of Aragon, Marshal Suchet behaved very differently. He enforced strict discipline on his troops, punishing any who tried to steal or extort money from the Spanish, while treating local authorities with respect. He combined this hearts and minds strategy with ruthless military action against the guerrillas that was able to establish firm control of Aragon. In June 1811, after a particularly bloody assault, Suchet took the port of Tarragona, for which Napoleon rewarded him with his marshal's baton.
That's super interesting that he decided to go with that tactic, with the hearts and minds strategy. Those of you who study warfare know that that was actually the strategy that the U.S. began to implement in Iraq and Afghanistan. And you can understand the thought process, right? If all of this incredibly harsh, reaction to the civilian populace continues to push civilians over to the side of the guerrillas, to the side of the resistance, well, then stop doing that, right? Like, quit forcing them over there and try to start implementing some sort of stability and normalcy and allow them to kind of just go about their lives. And maybe they'll start, they'll stop like hunting down and trying to kill you. But it's very interesting that he decided to go with that tactic. I'm curious to see how this works.
The emperor then sent him reinforcements and ordered him to take Valencia. First, he routed a much larger Spanish army that attacked him at Saguntum before he laid siege to Valencia. The city was packed with Spanish troops and refugees, and to avoid starvation, General Blake surrendered Valencia on the 8th of January 1812. The French took 18,000 prisoners, including 23 generals, and nearly 500 guns. It was a devastating blow to the Spanish cause. But to reinforce Suchet, Napoleon had stripped troops from other armies in Spain, and then withdrawn 25,000 of the best troops for his imminent invasion of Russia. The result was that French forces in Spain were now severely overstretched.
It's so bizarre to me that Napoleon decides to invade Russia while this is going on. Like, the invasion of Russia is kind of a bizarre invasion anyway. There's a lot of historical examples of that not going particularly well. But for him to be so bogged down in Spain, I mean, there are literally British troops in Spain, and he's taking troops to go help for the invasion for Russia. That just seems like such bizarre timing to me that's what his decision would be.
Just as Wellington prepared to strike. Spanish guerrillas kept Wellington well informed of French movements, and learning that the forces facing him in western Spain had been much weakened, he decided to go on the offensive, to strike a blow before the French could concentrate against him. On the day that Valencia fell, he laid siege to Ciudad Rodrigo on the Portuguese-Spanish frontier. Eager to take the city before Marshal Marmont could march to its relief, he ordered an assault after just 10 days. It succeeded, though Major General Crawford of the Light Division was among 300 killed. Wellington then marched south to besiege the much more strongly defended city of Badajoz. An assault was made on the night of the 6th of April. The first wave attacking the main breach were slaughtered. But what was supposed to be a diversionary attack on the city's castle with scaling ladders succeeded, and the city soon fell. The storming of Badajoz cost the British 3,700 casualties. In the aftermath, survivors went on the rampage, drinking, looting and raping, and killing more than 100 Spanish civilians, before British officers finally restored order.
And we talked about this some in the comments for the last video, about how there's a suspicion of the Spanish towards the British, and how they don't really see, like, they don't see the British as the ally that the British would like them to see them as. They don't want to give them military control of a lot of their troops. Even though the Spanish don't have good military leadership, they are highly, highly distrustful of the British. And you can certainly see why in a scenario like this. Whenever the British soldiers start going on a rampage through a Spanish city, a city that they're supposedly there to, like, help, you know, quote unquote help, you can understand why the Spanish are like, okay, well, we see the French and the British as kind of like the same things. Like, so we're kicking out one occupier and one terrible army for another one. You know, I can certainly understand the distrust of the Spanish towards the British.
Wellington had secured the two main routes between Spain and Portugal. Now he sent his most reliable subordinate, General Hill, with a small Anglo-Portuguese force to destroy the bridge over the Tagus at Almaraz. This was a vital link between Marmont's army of Portugal and Soult's army of the south, as the next usable bridge was at Toledo, 90 miles east.
Holy cow, you know who that guy looked like?
Marmont's army of Portugal.
That guy,
Now he sent his most reliable subordinate, General Hill.
That looks like Mr. Terry. So somebody tell Mr. Terry that he fought for the British during the Napoleonic Wars. Does that not look like him? I swear that looks just like him.
With a small Anglo-Portuguese force to destroy the bridge over the Tagus at Almaraz. This was a vital link between Marmont's army of Portugal and Soult's army of the south, as the next usable bridge was at Toledo, 90 miles east. The bridge was well guarded by forts and redoubts, but Hill led a swift and daring assault. The French defences were taken by surprise. The bridge itself and all the engineering equipment burned, for the cost of just 177 casualties. Wellington was now ready to begin his advance into Spain. Spanish regular forces and guerrilla bands began operations to tie down as many French troops as possible. While from the Bay of Biscay, Sir Hume Popham's naval raiding force made diversionary attacks on French coastal targets. In 4 days, Wellington was at Salamanca, as Marmont, outnumbered, withdrew behind the Douro River. But when reinforcements arrived, he crossed the river again. For 6 days, Marmont tried to march around Wellington's flank, but the British general matched him move for move, their two armies marching in parallel, often within sight of each other. But on the 7th day, Marmont blundered.
That's such an interesting, because in ancient warfare, that's extremely, extremely common. This like tactical back and forth kind of like dance that the armies do before they clash. And in ancient warfare, it can go on for weeks or months. Like, I mean, literally, generals will just move troops back and forth and try to flank or outmaneuver the other army before the battle ever starts. And it's just kind of this back and forth that they do. That's bizarre. I mean, that this kind of stuff happens all the way up to the modern day, where you have, troops being moved on a battlefield before a battle actually takes place. But that actual back and forth there with the way bigger armies and the way more sophisticated groups fighting, I don't know if I've ever heard of anything like that. Of this late in time, this sophisticated and large of forces still having the dance back and forth before the battle takes place in that way. That's kind of bizarre.
On the morning of the 22nd of July, Wellington's army occupied high ground 4 miles south of Salamanca. Marmont was not interested in a direct assault. He still sought to outflank Wellington, threaten his line of retreat to Portugal, and force him to fall back. Around 8 a.m., the French won a dash for a hill known as the Greater Arapil, which Marmont made his observation point. The French army began to swing round behind him. Marmont had convinced himself that Wellington was an overly cautious general who would not risk attack.
He is not about to open his entire flank up to the British position. There's no way he's about to do that.
The hills hid most of Wellington's army from view. And when Marmont saw dust clouds to the west, he assumed it was Wellington's baggage train leaving Salamanca, beginning their retreat. But it was the British 3rd Division and a Portuguese cavalry brigade moving up to strengthen Wellington's flank. Because he wasn't planning a retreat. He was about to attack. Around 2 p.m., Marmont ordered the 5 infantry divisions waiting in the woods behind him to march west, to cut off Wellington's imagined retreat.
Oh no.
General Mokoon's 5th Division, in the lead, stopped to engage what was presumed to be the British rearguard in the village of Los Arapiles. General Thomier's 7th Division continued west past it. Wellington watched as the French left flank became increasingly strung out, and knew it was an opportunity too good to miss. He galloped 3 miles across country to the 3rd Division to give the crucial orders in person. Many of his staff officers struggled to keep up.
Yeah, he's probably losing his mind right now as he watches the French flank literally just string out along in front of his army. I'm sure he was hauling ass to go give the order. This is one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen. Like, the overconfidence of like that they won't attack from the French here is wild. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing?
On arrival, he instructed the division's commander, his own brother-in-law, Edward Pakenham, to attack and drive everything before him. Third Division's advance was hidden by low hills until the last minute. Thomières's division was caught completely unawares and shattered by the assault. Thomières himself was killed, half his division killed or captured, the rest soon put to flight. At this crucial moment, Marshal Marmont was hit by a British shell and carried from the field seriously wounded. His second-in-command, General Bonnet, was himself wounded an hour later, so command passed to General Clausel. 45 minutes later, the British 5th Division attacked, supported by 2 Portuguese brigades and General Le Marchand's dragoons. The French saw the cavalry coming and formed square, but were hit first by the British infantry, who unleashed a close-range volley, then charged with the bayonet. The French were routed and charged down by Le Marchand's cavalry. French 6th Division was caught up in the collapse. Le Marchand himself was shot from the saddle, but his brigade had helped destroy 8 French battalions and capture 2 Eagles.
There is no French line at all. I mean, literally at all. There is no French line. It is just pockets of troops, groups here and there strung out along this line. Most of the French troops are marching or going the wrong direction. Their flank is entirely exposed. This is awful, awful, awful strategic implementation by the French here.
Wellington's echelon attack continued as Cole's 4th Division advanced in the centre. But Pack's Portuguese brigade was thrown back from the Greater Arapil, and the whole division was soon falling back in disorder. Despite the devastation of his army's left flank, General Clausel decided to launch an attack on the Lesser Arapil, the hinge of Wellington's position. If it could be taken, he might still snatch victory from the jaws of defeat.
Yeah, this is an extremely risky gamble here, because if you take it, yeah, you might actually somehow win this awful, awful battle that you have put yourself in. But your left flank is collapsing, so you don't even have to outright lose there. If you just get bogged down there, you could get completely wiped out. All of your forces would be completely gone, except anybody that's far enough back that they could get out of Dodge.
But the French advance was met by fresh troops of Clinton's 6th Division, who poured volleys of musket fire into the French columns. They began to fall back. The French army had lost the will to fight on, its soldiers streaming away into the woods behind them. General Ferré's 3rd Division mounted a brave rearguard action to buy the rest of the army time to escape, but it faced a hopeless task. It was soon outflanked by the British 5th Division, and Ferré himself was killed. Only General Foy's 1st Division escaped in good order. With darkness falling and his army exhausted, Wellington called off the pursuit. Wellington had smashed Marmont's army, taking 7,000 prisoners and killing or wounding 6,000 more, a French casualty rate of 25%, and more than double Wellington's own losses. The next day, dragoons of the King's German Legion attacked the French rearguard and achieved the almost unheard-of feat of charging down a French infantry square and taking another 1,000 prisoners. Wellington now decided to march on Madrid, forcing King Joseph to abandon the capital and retreat to Valencia to join up with Marshal Suchet.
Okay, so this is a change of pace from most of the battles that have happened in the Napoleonic War. Even the few and far between battles that have been won against Napoleon's forces, normally Napoleon gets out or his army gets out and then that's it, right? So the losses he took during the battle is all he's going to take. There is no trying to track down and, you know, harass the fleeing army. And here Wellington goes, fights the rear guard again, takes more prisoners, and then immediately goes down to take Madrid. This is a continuous offensive off of the loss of Napoleon's army here, and it's a total change of pace from anything I've seen in these videos so far.
On the 12th of August, Wellington liberated the city to scenes of wild celebration. Soult, now at risk of being cut off in Andalusia, abandoned the siege of Cadiz, which had dragged on for 2.5 years, and marched east to join Joseph and Suchet. The following month, Wellington marched north, pushing the French back from Valladolid and besieging the castle of Burgos. But his army lacked heavy guns, and the French garrison fought bravely. As powerful French armies gathered to the north and south, Wellington himself was now in danger of being trapped. He had no choice but to withdraw. Wellington's retreat turned into a desperate forced march through autumn rain. The supply system collapsed, and many starving soldiers looted what food they could find from Spanish villages. Madrid was abandoned and reoccupied by the French on the 1st of November. Wellington was back where he'd started 5 months before. But despite the campaign's dismal conclusion, his strike into Spain had led to the liberation of huge swathes of the country and left the French more overstretched than ever. Reinforced and resupplied, Wellington would be back the next year to deliver the final blow to Joseph's Spanish kingdom. 1812 had seen the tide of war turn, and not just in Spain, because 2,000 miles to the east, in Russia, catastrophe had engulfed La Grande Armée. Thank you to...
Okay, so that was the Napoleon video on Salamanca. Like, comment, subscribe, and I will, like I said, get to the rest of the Hannibal series later today, and then start into the other recommendations probably tomorrow. But I'll keep putting in the Napoleon videos. I'm going to stay at a pretty quick pace for the Napoleon videos. So I will see you guys then.